Hi, kids. It's Pastor Laura. I've been working on my affirmation that I will remember God is within me and all others. I took these Post-it notes and I posted them kind of everywhere in our house. They're on the refrigerator, in the microwave, and next to my bed and on the front door. And I've been keeping a calendar of marking all the days that I remember that affirmation without having to look. And I'm getting better. Look, in the beginning, I was missing a couple of days and the Post-it notes reminded me. But this is the last few days. Look at this. I have 6 days in a row where I remembered it as soon as I woke up and I didn't have to look at any Post-it notes. I think that if I kept this calendar even for one more week, I wouldn't need it anymore. So I'm wondering how it's going for you, how you're doing at remembering that God is within you and all other people too. So keep keeping track until you know for sure that God is within you and with all other people too. That's a really important thing to know because there are lots of people who don't know that. And I think that's why some people are mean, because they just don't know that God is inside of them and God is in everyone else. When we know that, it helps us treat each other like family. And that's what today's lesson is all about. We have a new affirmation, but it's right in line with the one we're already learning. The new one is that the whole world is home and we are all part of God's family. The whole world is our home and we're part of God's family. Yes, yes, yes. So, do you know where we live? Well, first of all, Calgary. And Calgary is the city, right? And it's inside of the province of Alberta. And Alberta is a province of Canada. So first, do you know what we call people who live in Calgary? We call them Calgarians. So if you live inside the city of Calgary, you are a Calgarian. And do you know what we call people who live in Alberta? You could probably guess that we call them Albertans. And you know what we call people who live in Canada? We call them Canadians. So we are Calgarian, Albertan Canadians. And that reminds me of somebody named Socrates. He lived a long, long time ago, like 2,000 years ago. And he lived in a country called Greece. And he lived in a city called Athens. And they called people who lived in Athens Athenians. And they called people who lived in Greece Grecians. And he said this. I'm looking to see what he said so I get it exactly. He said, I am not an Athenian and I am not Grecian, but a citizen of the world. So even though he was Athenian and Grecian, he said there was something more important. There was a more important way to define where he lived. And he said that he was a citizen of the whole world. So even 2,000 years ago, he was living this affirmation that we're trying to learn now, which is that the whole world is home and we are all part of God's family. So if we're citizens of the whole world is our home and we're all part of God's family, then how do you think we should treat each other? Well, it's easy to love the people who love us. It's easy to treat them well. But how should we treat people who do things that we don't like? Well, I have a couple of stories about that. One is a story called Those Darn Squirrels. It's one of my favorites. And the other is a story from a Bible. Let's take a look.
Those Darn Squirrels. On the outskirts of town, at the edge of the forest, there was a little old house. The only thing older than the little house was the man who lived in it. Old Man Fookwire. Old Man Fookwire was so old that when he sneezed, dust came out. He was also a grump. He hated pie. He hated puppies. The only thing he liked was birds. All summer long, the old man painted pictures of the birds that visited his backyard. There were whirlybirds and bonga birds, baba birds and yaba birds. Even a rare flugel bird came by once or twice. Fookwire's paintings weren't very good, but the birds never said anything. When the air turned crisp and the leaves began to change color, the old man grew sad. He knew that soon the birds will fly south for the winter, as they did every year, and that he would be lonely. Then he had an idea. If he fed the birds, maybe they would stick around. So Old Man Fookwire built beautiful bird feeders and put them up all around his backyard. He filled the feeders with delicious seeds and berries, and soon birds came from all over the forest just to eat in the old man's yard. But the birds weren't the only ones who liked the bird feeders. The squirrels did too. Not many people knew this, but squirrels are the cleverest of all the woodland creatures. In fact, they're fuzzy little geniuses. They can make a house out of a tree, a bed out of a bunch of leaves, and a box kite out of twigs, dirt, and squirrel spit. They are also excellent at math. Winter was fast approaching, and the squirrels needed to gather as much food as they could to get ready, so they decided to take some of the bird food. The birds were not happy. Neither was Old Man Fookwire. When he discovered what has happened, he shook his old man fist and yelled, "Those darn squirrels!" He filled up the feeders again, but this time he hung them from a clothesline. Then he went back inside, confident that the squirrels would no longer be able to get the seeds and berries. But the squirrels were determined. They devised a plan, and this time they took all the food from the bird feeders. The birds were furious. "Harumph, harumph, harumph," yelled a bonga bird. "Those darn squirrels," yelled Old Man Fookwire. "Yum," said the squirrels. Now it was Old Man Fookwire's turn to devise a plan. He went to the general store to get supplies. He bought lasers and clamps. He bought wires and springs. He bought all sorts of tools and built a veritable fortress round his bird feeders. Then he refilled them very carefully. "Na, na, 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 na," snorted the flugel bird. The squirrels stayed up all night working out their strategy. They drank cherry cola and ate salt and vinegar chips to help them stay awake. Finally, they had it, the perfect plan. They put on their tiny helmets and prepared to launch themselves into the air, over the fence, between the lasers, and onto the bird feeders. The first squirrel misfired and hit a tree. The second squirrel went too high and landed in a bucket. The third squirrel sailed clear over the house. The birds laughed and laughed. They each had one last delicious mouthful of seeds and berries from the old man's feeders. Then they flew south for the winter, just as they did every year. "Tabizz," said the flugel bird. After the birds left, Old Man Fookwire was lonely, just as he was every year. He fixed himself some cottage cheese and pepper, his favorite snack, but he was still lonely. When he looked out the window, the squirrels could tell that he wasn't happy. "Go away," shouted the old man. I don't like you, squirrels. The squirrels held a meeting deep inside a large tree. They decided to give the old man a present to make up for taking the seeds and berries. Now, not many people know this, but squirrels are not only fuzzy little geniuses, they also collect just about anything they find on the ground. These squirrels had a vast stockpile of spectacular junk to choose from. But what would Fookwire like? Bottle caps? Popsicle sticks? Postage stamps? Finally, they had it. The perfect gift. The squirrels stacked all of their loose change on Old Man Fookwire's doorstep. There were dimes and pennies. There were nickels and quarters. There were even a few tokens from Coco's Arcade. It all added up to $47.36, plus a few rounds of skee-ball. Maybe you squirrels aren't so bad, Fookwire said when he found the coins, but I still like birds better. This gave the squirrels another idea. They raided their junk collection again and got to work. When Old Man Fookwire woke up the next morning, he was amazed to see that the birds had returned. But wait, those things weren't birds. They were squirrels in disguise. Great googly moogly, said the Old Man Fookwire. This will make quite a painting. He ran outside and took down the lasers and the wires and the spring-loaded trapeze. He turned all the bird feeders into squirrel feeders. Then he painted till his brush ran out of bristles. The squirrels were so overjoyed, they had a party in Old Man Fookwire's house. Those darn squirrels, said Fookwire, and he shook his old man fist and smiled. Love your enemies. Jesus taught people everywhere about God. Jesus' teachings were different from what people had heard before. This made people curious about what Jesus had to say. One day, Jesus was talking about how to treat your enemies. Jesus said, if someone hurts you, don't hurt them back. Wow, that was different. Then Jesus said, if someone asks for your help, say, sure. People hadn't always thought like that before. And remember to share what you have with other people, he said. Jesus had the people thinking. Then Jesus said a very important thing. Everyone says, love your friends and hate your enemies. I say, love your enemies and pray for people who are mean to you. This is what really makes God happy. The things Jesus said changed the way people thought about treating others.
Wow, those squirrels had to get very creative to figure out how to be nice to Old Man Fookwire and have him get that they were okay to be friends with. They did a really great job. They made up all sorts of things, and they really thought about it, and they really used the things that they already had. They were really creative and very resourceful. And sometimes we have to do that in order to make friends with people that we're not already friends with. And I am really glad that Jesus talked about that and talked about how important that is. And we can think right back to Socrates and right back to our new affirmation that the whole world is home and everyone is part of God's family. But we also have a story of what that looks like when it's real people. So we're going to hear now the story of the Good Samaritan. Let's take a listen to that.
Today's Bible story is called The Good Samaritan. A clever man who thought he knew all the rules of living God's way asked Jesus a question. He wanted to see if he could trick Jesus into giving the wrong answer. "Teacher," he said, "what must I do to live forever with God?" Jesus asked another question. "What do the commandments say?" The man answered, "The commandments say you should love God with everything you have, and you should love your neighbor as much as you love yourself." Jesus replied, "That's the right answer. Live like this and you'll live with God forever." "So Jesus," the man continued, "who's my neighbor?" Jesus answered the question with a story. A man was traveling down a scary and rocky road by himself. All of a sudden, a group of men jumped out. They stole his money and hurt him, leaving him by the side of the road. He moaned and groaned in pain. He couldn't get up. A little while later, a priest was going down the road. He saw the hurt man and passed by him on the opposite side of the road. Later, another man came along and passed on the other side of the road too. When a Samaritan came along and saw that the man was hurt, he stopped to help him. A tear ran down the Samaritan's cheek as he bent down to help the hurt man. He put bandages on the man's cuts. The Samaritan huffed and puffed as he tried to lift the man onto his donkey. He took the man to the nearest inn and put him in a room. He took care of him for the rest of that day. The next day, the Samaritan had to leave for a few days. He paid the innkeeper to take care of the hurt man. The Samaritan promised to return and pay the innkeeper any more money that was needed to care for the man. He wanted the hurt man to get better. After Jesus finished the story, he asked the clever man, which of the 3 men was a neighbor to the man who was hurt? The man replied, the one who stopped to help him. Jesus told him, God wants us to help everyone. People of every size, shape, and color, and from every country are important to God. Now go and be like the Samaritan and help everyone who needs help.
Sometimes when we are trying to be nice to people, we really have to go out of our way. Just like that man did. He went out of his way and he took care of somebody who was hurt, and he had to use his money and he had to use his time. And sometimes it's like that. We have to be, like the squirrels showed us, we have to be creative. And like the Samaritan man showed us, we have to go out of our way and we have to use our money. And Jesus tells us these are good things to do, because if we're all part of God's family, then we do help each other and we do go out of the way and we do things to make a difference for other people. I have a little activity for us this morning. And it goes like this. Like sometimes, I just want to show you how this works. Sometimes it seems like we're the only ones around and we're the only ones who matter, and we have to just take care of ourselves and not worry about anything else, but just take care of ourselves. And if everyone could take care of themselves, things would be okay. But we actually need each other. Sometimes we can't take care of ourselves. And we also need friends. I think COVID-19 and being isolated is showing us how important our friends and our church family and other people are to us. So this isn't actually one person. It's a whole bunch of people together in a community. And I bet you could guess why I made these today. It's because the whole world is home and we are all part of God's family. So you can make these at home too, to remind you of the affirmation today and to remind you that you're called to be friends with people and to try to make friends with people who may not be very nice to you. And what you're going to need is a piece of paper. You can cut it into a strip. I have a pretty long piece of paper, but it doesn't really matter how big your paper is. You just need a strip. And then you're going to fold that strip just back and forth onto itself. And you have to do it kind of evenly so that the folds are in the same places. I don't know if you can see this. See, I have the folds and they're kind of the same width. They're in the same place. I'm just going to keep folding this and then I'll show you what it's like when it's done. Keep folding back and forth. They call this an accordion fold. You just keep folding back and forth until you're all the way folded. And if you have a little bit, I have a little tiny bit, you could cut that off. I'm going to cut that off. There's a little piece that's overhanging that's a little bit too long. I'm just going to cut that off. Be careful when you cut that you're only cutting that part. Okay, so this is how my paper's folded. It was folded back and forth. So you can see that. And then it all folds up so that it's about the same size, right? So when you have that, then you're going to draw a person on there, and just wait. I'm going to draw mine and I'm going to show you what it looks like, because you have to draw it in a particular way or this won't work out. And you can draw the body any way you want. I'm just kind of drawing a stick figure kind of a body like the one I showed you before. All right. So this is how I drew my body. And you have to draw the body so that the hands are on the fold, the hands and the feet. This one's a little bit off, but you want to do it more like this. So the hands and the feet are on the fold. So when I cut this out, I'm not going to cut here or here, because that's what holds the people together. I'll show you with this other one. See how I didn't cut the hands when I cut this one. So I didn't cut here and I didn't cut here. And that's what makes them stick together. See that? So then you're just going to cut, and you can draw whatever kind of thing you want on here as long as you make sure there's connections on the folds. So I'm just going to cut this out. So first I cut off that bottom piece, see that, but I kept those legs and the folds. Then I'm going to cut out just this part right here between the hands and the feet, between the arms and the legs here. Do you know if you have a ginger person, usually they make those in the shape of girls and boys, but if you have ginger cookie cutters, you can trace around that and use that cookie cutter. That might be kind of interesting. But see, I'm going to cut that one out. I'm going to cut this one out now too. And then I'm just going to cut that last bit around the arms and the head. That's probably the trickiest part here. Oh, not tricky. All right, there it is. Gotta get my thumb off the scissors. There it is, all cut out. And then when we open it up, look, we can remember that the whole world is home and we are all part of God's family. Let's pray together. Dear God, help us remember that you love everyone, and help us to love everyone too. Amen. I just have one more thing to say. That story about Old Man Fookwire really was sort of true. Squirrels really are like that, and there really are people that don't like them eating in their bird feeders. So I put a very funny video about squirrels and about them actually doing these kinds of things. And you can find that if you click, I think it's going to be below, look above or below. I don't know which way it is. Look above or look below, and you'll find that link. It's very good and very funny. So I wish you a good week. Remember to keep learning your affirmations, and good luck with your paper people that show us the whole world is home and we're all part of God's family. Bye for now.